Beneath the dazzling, almost artificial glow of the Dubai skyline, where ambition is etched in glass and steel, exists a parallel city. This other Dubai is not found on tourist maps or in the shimmering lobbies of seven-star hotels. It is a city of silence, hidden behind the high, impersonal walls of private villas in districts like Nad el-Sheba, where the only sound is the whisper of air conditioning and the quiet, desperate prayers of the invisible. In one such mansion, a place that stood as a monument to unimaginable wealth, a routine renovation was about to tear a hole in this carefully constructed world of shadows. The air, usually scented with exotic flowers and polished marble, was thick with the dust of demolition. Workers, tasked with modernizing a servants' corridor, swung their sledgehammers, their blows echoing through the opulent emptiness. Then, a strike hit something that was neither concrete nor wire. The sound was different, a dull, final thud. As the dust settled, they pulled away the broken drywall to reveal a horror that would freeze the blood in their veins, a human skeleton, curled in a fetal position, entombed within the very structure of the house. This grim discovery was the answer to a 2-year-old mystery, the final, heartbreaking punctuation to the life of a 23-year-old Sri Lankan woman named Nura Alam. But to dismiss this as a simple, tragic death of a migrant worker would be to miss the terrifying truth. This was a key, turning in a lock that had sealed away a vault of dark secrets. It would crack open a story of forbidden desire, chilling psychological manipulation, and a level of calculated cruelty that proves the most opulent prisons have no need for visible bars. This is a story that exposes the brutal human cost of a system built on immense power and immense vulnerability, a tale that forces us to look at the gleaming facade of global luxury and ask what, and who, it truly rests upon. To our incredible community of truth seekers and advocates for the unseen, thank you for joining us as we pull back the gilded curtain on the world's most shocking and suppressed cases. If you are ready to confront the darkness that can fester in the most exclusive neighborhoods, and understand the real price of a life of servitude, make sure you are subscribed and have your notifications on. What we uncover today is not just a single crime, but a systemic failure that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about justice and power. Nura Alam's story begins a world away from the climate-controlled malls of the UAE, in a place where life is dictated not by stock markets, but by the tides. In the small, sun-bleached fishing village of Kalatara, Sri Lanka, the Alam family knew a struggle that was as deep and constant as the Indian Ocean that bordered their home. Here, Nura, the eldest of 5 children, had learned to shoulder the weight of responsibility before she had even fully understood her own dreams. Her father's fishing boat, their sole inheritance and lifeline, had been splintered into driftwood by a vicious monsoon the previous year. Her mother, Kamala, was waging a desperate and terrifyingly expensive war against cervical cancer, a battle that was draining not just her strength, but the family's meager savings, 1 rupee at a time. Nura possessed a fierce, quiet intelligence. She had been bright enough to earn a coveted spot in a Colombo nursing school, a dream that promised a different future. But with her family's survival on the line, she made the choice so many young women in her position are forced to make. She deferred her future, year after year, trading textbooks for a sewing machine in a local garment factory. Her wages were a temporary dam against a rising tide of debt. Neighbors remembered her not for her ambitions, but for her quiet strength. She was the girl who tutored the local children for free when their parents couldn't afford lessons, who cared for the elderly when their own families were overwhelmed, a steady and compassionate presence in a community all too familiar with hardship. The crisis reached its devastating peak on a sweltering March evening in 2019. The hospital, losing patients, demanded payment upfront for Kamala's next round of chemotherapy. The sum was 75,000 rupees, more than her father could earn in 6 months during a good fishing season. That night, the house was lit by candles to save on electricity. the flickering light casting long shadows on the faces of her frightened younger siblings. It was in this gloom that Nura made a decision that would seal her fate. The family sold their last remaining treasure, her grandmother's 22-carat gold necklace. A family heirloom passed down through generations, their final safety net. The money from the necklace was just enough to cover the immediate medical bills and pay a recruitment agent in Colombo, a man with a disarming smile and gold-capped teeth who painted a picture of Dubai that shimmered with impossible promise. He spoke of Emirati families who treated their domestic staff like daughters, of a culture of respect, of salaries that could not only cover her mother's treatment but lift her entire family out of poverty permanently. He promised a contract, a visa, a legitimate path to a better life. What he deliberately omitted was the truth, that her age would be altered on the official documents, her experience fabricated, and the contract she would sign was a masterclass in legal trickery, designed to indebt her and lower her actual pay to almost nothing. She was not being hired, she was being acquired. Her last morning in Kalattara dawned hot and humid, the air already thick with the promise of the day's heat. Her mother, frail and weakened by both disease and heartbreak, insisted on preparing Nura's favorite breakfast, hoppers with cheese and coconut sambo. Her 4 younger siblings clung to her, making her promise weekly video calls and begging for pictures of the legendary Burj Khalifa, a building they had only seen in tattered magazines. At the Bandaranaque International Airport, her father, a man of few words whose spirit had been weathered by a lifetime of labor and recent grief, pressed a small, tarnished silver cross into her palm, a talisman his own father had carried for decades on the unpredictable sea. As the Emirates flight lifted off, Nura pressed her face to the cool window, watching as the emerald-green island that contained her entire world, every memory and every person she loved, shrank away into the endless, indifferent blue of the ocean. The Dubai that greeted her was a disorienting assault on the senses. The driver who met her at the arrivals terminal wore dark sunglasses despite the artificial lighting and remained utterly silent during the hour-long drive. Nura stared through the tinted windows at a world that seemed to be built from a different reality. Highways wider than her entire village, supercars that cost more than her entire lineage would ever earn, and everywhere, the relentless, gleaming proof of unimaginable wealth. The Burj Khalifa pierced the haze ahead of them, a modern-day Babel that seemed to mock her smallness. When the car finally stopped, it was before immense, ornate gates in Nad el-Sheba that swung open electronically, revealing a sprawling, starkly modern mansion. The last photograph her family would ever receive shows Nura standing hesitantly before the grand entrance, a forced smile on her face, a young woman stepping across a threshold from which there would be no return. She had arrived at what she believed was her salvation, not knowing she was entering a gilded cage where fairy tales curdle into nightmares. The architect of this prison was Sheikh Latif bin Malik. To the outside world, he was the very picture of Dubai's elite, a semi-retired logistics magnate with a fortune estimated at $500 million. A respected philanthropist, a distant cousin to the ruling family with impeccable connections. The society pages adored him, particularly at charity galas for women's rights and workers' welfare, where he was often photographed receiving awards for his humanitarian contributions. The profound, gut-wrenching irony of this public image was a poison known only to those who lived and worked within the soundproofed walls of his home. Behind this carefully curated facade was a man whose private compulsions had already dismantled 2 previous marriages and fueled an alarming turnover of domestic staff, a churn that exceeded 300% annually. His current wife, Soraya, was a 48-year-old former model from Lebanon, whose stunning beauty had, over their 12-year marriage, sharpened into a weapon of cold calculation. She had long ago traded any illusions of romantic love for the stark reality of survival, understanding that her primary role was to manage her husband's wandering eye and volatile appetites, while fiercely protecting her own unassailable position as the mistress of the household. They were not partners in love, but co-conspirators in maintaining an empire built on fear and control. The villa itself was a masterpiece of both opulence and oppression. The main residence was a showpiece of Italian marble, Austrian crystal chandeliers, and Persian rugs worth $50,000 apiece. It was a museum of wealth. Every object meticulously placed to demonstrate Latif's refined, global taste. But hidden behind this main wing, accessible only through a service corridor that guests never saw, was the parallel universe of the staff quarters. Here, luxury was replaced by utilitarian harshness. The rooms were small, windowless boxes, poorly ventilated and designed for maximum occupancy, not comfort. Nura's room was the most claustrophobic of all, a converted storage closet measuring just 4 by 6 feet, barely large enough for a thin mattress on the tile floor, and a plastic bucket that served multiple purposes. In the summer months, temperatures in these rooms could easily exceed 95 degrees Fahrenheit, with no air conditioning and minimal ventilation. The entire property was a technologically advanced fortress. 12-foot walls topped with razor wire encircled the estate. Guards monitored the single entrance around the clock, and no member of staff could leave without explicit, logged permission. Most insidiously, signal jammers installed in the staff quarters effectively cut off all cell phone communication with the outside world. It was a prison that needed no physical bars. Its walls were built from isolation and digital silence. Nura's induction into this world was a brutal process of dehumanization. Her daily routine began at 4:30 a.m. and rarely ended before 11 p.m. She prepared breakfast for a family that pretended she didn't exist, cleaned 8 marble bathrooms to a spotless perfection, ironed over 30 items of clothing daily, and prepared elaborate meals for business dinners and social gatherings. Her hands, once soft and skilled with a needle, became raw, cracked, and bleeding from constant exposure to industrial-grade cleaning chemicals used without protective gloves. On her second day, Latif summoned her to his office. "Your passport," he stated simply, his tone implying this was a standard, benevolent procedure. "For safekeeping. Dubai can be dangerous for young women alone." The document disappeared into his personal safe, along with her return ticket and any tangible hope of leaving without his consent. Sleep became a luxury measured in minutes, not comfort, with the demands of the villa granting her 4 hours on a good night, often less if Latif was entertaining or decided the marble floors needed an extra polish. The psychological siege began subtly. Latif's grooming process was a masterclass in manipulation. It started with compliments on her appearance, then escalated to accidental, physical contact, a hand on her shoulder that lingered too long, fingers that would brush against her palm as she handed him tea. By the 4th week, he was summoning her to his office for late-night errands, which increasingly involved simply enduring his intense, appraising stare. Soraya observed these developments not with the anger of a jealous wife, but with the cold, analytical eye of a CEO assessing a corporate threat. She began her own campaign of psychological warfare, isolating Nura from other staff and delivering veiled warnings. "You're lucky to be here," she told Nura during one of their first encounters, a thread of menace woven through her words. "Girls like you disappear in Dubai every single day." Then, in a calculated shift, Latif's behavior transformed. He began to present a mask of kindness and intellectual kinship. He would appear in doorways as she worked, watching her with what seemed like genuine interest rather than cold assessment. "You're different from the others, Nura," he told her one evening as she cleaned his study, his voice carrying a warmth that made her pause. "There's something special about you, an intelligence in your eyes the others lacked." These moments of apparent recognition were like life rafts to a drowning woman. When he learned of her mother's cancer, his expression softened with what looked like sincere concern. I can help your family, he suggested, leaning against his mahogany desk. Send more money, get your mother better treatment. The best doctors in Colombo, private rooms, experimental therapies that could save her life. The promises hung in the air, each one more seductive than the last. The gifts began to materialize in her tiny closet. Delicate silk scarves in colors that complemented her skin, jewelry that caught the light. When she moved, perfumes that smelled of jasmine and rose, fragrances that cost more than her family's monthly income. Each item came with a specific instruction. The emerald earrings were to be worn only when serving dinner. The blue scarf was for when she cleaned his private quarters. These are our special moments, he explained, fastening a gold bracelet around her wrist. Never take it off. It's a symbol of how much you mean to me. When Soraya traveled to Lebanon to visit her family, Latif's attentions escalated into what he called their private dinners. Evenings where he would summon her to his study to share elaborate meals he had ordered for them. During these carefully orchestrated encounters, he would speak of his loneliness, his disappointment in his previous marriages, and his search for a genuine connection. He showed her photographs of other servants who, he claimed, had found happiness through his special attention. Look at Priya, he said, pointing to a smiling young woman in expensive clothes standing beside a luxury car. She's married now, living in Canada with her own family. I made that possible for her because she understood our special bond. Most disturbingly, he began telling Nura that she reminded him of his first love, a Lebanese woman from his university days in Beirut. Amal had your eyes, he would say, his gaze growing distant and hungry. The same way of carrying yourself. The same grace. I lost her because I was young and foolish. I won't make that mistake again. The comparison was a noose tightening around her neck, transforming her into a stand-in for a ghost from his past. Nura found herself trapped in a hopeless double bind, a psychological vice that tightened with each passing day. Her mother's condition was deteriorating, according to the scant news she received, and her family was desperately counting on the extra money Latif had promised. She was completely isolated from any support system, without friends, without allies, and without any means of contacting the outside world without his permission. Her legal status was entirely dependent on his sponsorship. Resistance felt like signing her own deportation order, and her family's death sentence. The first cracks in her psyche began to show almost immediately. She stopped eating regularly, her appetite vanishing under the weight of constant anxiety. Sleep became impossible in her airless closet, every sound causing her to freeze in terror, fearing Latif's approach. She began whispering to herself in Sinhalese, conducting conversations with her mother and sisters that existed only in her mind. Desperate to maintain a connection to the person she was before entering this marble prison, Nura's world was collapsing inward. The discovery of the hidden gifts by Soraya triggered a retaliation that revealed the full extent of her calculated cruelty. During an unscheduled inspection, Soraya found the jewelry tucked under Nura's mattress. Her face transformed into something cold and predatory. The beating that followed was delivered with Soraya's own designer high heels. Each blow was precise, aimed to inflict maximum pain and humiliation without leaving immediately visible scars on her face. Don't think you're special, Soraya hissed as Nura curled into a ball on the floor. You are a cleaning girl, a servant, and I will make you disappear like the others if you ever forget your place. The punishment escalated into a systematic program of torture designed to break her spirit completely. Her food was restricted to 1 meal a day, served with deliberate ceremony to emphasize her dependence. She was locked in her closet for 48-hour stretches without food or water, forced to use the bucket in the sweltering dark, hallucinating from dehydration. Most humiliating of all, During one of Latif's business dinners, she was forced to clean the guest bathrooms with her bare hands while prominent Dubai businessmen looked on and laughed. The most insidious aspect of her torment, however, was how Latif and Soraya began to work in tandem, presenting a united front that made escape seem impossible. They perfected a good cop, bad cop routine that kept Nura perpetually off balance. "I'm trying to protect you from her wrath," Latif would whisper when Soraya's abuse was particularly harsh. "But you have to show me you're grateful for my protection." Meanwhile, Soraya would appear during his absences with a facade of false compassion. "Only I can save you from his desires," she would say. "But first you must prove your loyalty to me." The other staff members in the villa were living their own stories of survival and complicity. James, the Pakistani driver, warned Nura of the futility of seeking help from the authorities. "The Sheikh's cousin is a high-ranking police officer," he explained while loading groceries. "Any complaint disappears. Any investigation gets dropped. The smart ones stop fighting and just survive." His words carried the weight of someone who had seen too many tragedies unfold without intervention. Sylvia, the Kenyan head housekeeper who had survived 8 years in the house, had witnessed the arrival and departure of 12 other girls. "They burned the last girl's passport right in front of us," she told Nura in a rare, unguarded moment in the villa's garden. She showed Nura a hidden shrine of small stones arranged under a jasmine bush. "Each one is for a girl who vanished," Sylvia whispered. "This is how we remember them. It's all we can do." Despite the overwhelming odds, a spark of defiance refused to be extinguished in Nura. She began to meticulously document her abuse and plan her resistance. She smuggled a letter to her family through a sympathetic grocery delivery driver, but the message was intercepted before it could reach Sri Lanka, and the driver was immediately deported. Her first escape attempt, made during a rare moment when the family was out, was thwarted by the estate's security cameras, which tracked her all the way to the main gate, resulting in a 72-hour lockdown in her closet without food or water. Undeterred, she continued her secret rebellion, hiding a diary under a loose floorboard, using a small compact mirror to document her injuries, and creating detailed maps of the villa with potential escape routes. Every act of defiance was a declaration that some part of her remained unbroken, even as Latif's ultimate ultimatum loomed: complete submission to his desires in exchange for the money that could save her mother's life. Latif's obsession with Nura morphed from calculated manipulation into something far more dangerous: a genuine delusion. In her 4th month at the villa, he installed a hidden camera in her closet, watching her sleep on a live feed on his phone during business meetings. His control extended to choosing her outfits each morning, laying out specific combinations that catered to his aesthetic fantasy: the emerald dress for Mondays, the cream blouse for Friday shopping, each ensemble carefully selected to fulfill his vision of the perfect companion. Their evening dinners became a mandatory ritual where Nura was forced to sit across from him in his study, pretending to enjoy meals while he monologued about his day, his dreams, and his increasingly elaborate plans for their shared future. "You understand me in a way Soraya never could," he would tell her, his eyes gleaming with the fervor of a man who had convinced himself that fear was a form of affection. He began introducing her to business associates as his beautiful young companion, showing off pictures of her and the jewelry he had given her, describing their romance with the pride of a man displaying a prized acquisition. The expensive perfumes he bought for her, Chanel, Tom Ford, rare scents that cost more than her family's monthly income, became another form of branding. Each fragrance was applied under his supervision. Each bottle was a mark of his ownership. "This jasmine reminds me of the gardens in Lebanon," he would murmur, dabbing the perfume behind her ears with fingers that lingered too long. "Now you smell like happiness." Nura developed sophisticated survival strategies that allowed her mind to escape even when her body could not. During his assaults, she learned to dissociate, directing her consciousness back to the fishing boats of Kalutara. While her physical form endured his attention, she feigned compliance with increasing sophistication, offering smiles that masked her plans, responding to his affectionate gestures while mentally charting escape routes. Most importantly, she began to teach herself Arabic through overheard conversations, understanding for the first time the full scope of their discussions about her fate. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in her 5th month of captivity. In a rare gesture of feigned kindness, Latif allowed her to speak with her family. The voice of her youngest sister, quiet and broken, delivered the news that shattered her world. Their mother had died 3 days earlier, succumbing to the cancer Nura's salary was meant to combat. They had never received enough money for proper treatment. She had never gotten to say goodbye. Her mother had never known if her eldest daughter was safe or suffering. Latif's reaction to her grief revealed the full depth of his manipulation. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he said, pulling her into an embrace as she sobbed. "Let me help. I will pay for a lavish funeral, the best Kalutara has ever seen. Your mother will be honored like a queen." The offer came with an explicit price tag, gratitude expressed through physical submission. "I am the only family you have now," he whispered into her hair. "Let me care for you the way a man should care for the woman he loves." But grief transformed Nura in a way Latif could not comprehend. The desperate young woman who had arrived seeking salvation was gone, replaced by someone with nothing left to lose. She stopped pretending gratitude. She stopped smiling when he entered a room. She stopped participating in the elaborate charade of their relationship. Her rebellion was quiet, but unmistakable. It was a shift that even Soraya noted with alarm. This change set in motion a dangerous evolution in the villa's power dynamics. Latif convinced himself that Nura's sorrow was merely an obstacle on their path to happiness, one that time would heal. He began consulting lawyers about formalizing Nura's status as his third wife, researching the procedures for a proper Islamic marriage while maintaining his existing union with Soraya. In his delusion, he saw this as the perfect solution. Soraya would retain her position as senior wife, and Nura would become his beloved junior spouse. "It's the perfect solution, really," he told his lawyer with conviction. "Soraya can focus on social duties, while Nura provides the companionship I truly need." But Soraya realized that becoming a co-wife would be far worse than mere replacement. As a senior wife, she would be expected to accept, even mentor, Nura, watching daily as Latif doted on his new bride while taking her own position for granted. "I will not be made equal to this village girl," she confided to her sister in a phone call Nura overheard while cleaning. "I will not share my home, my status, or my husband with some desperate maid." The prospect of permanent co-wife status filled Soraya with a rage that made her previous cruelties seem restrained. She began planning not just to eliminate the threat, but to ensure no other young woman would ever challenge her position in Latif's affections again. Seeing her chances of survival dwindling, Nura made a desperate gamble. She began to feign acceptance of Latif's vision for their future, letting him believe that grief was softening her resistance. "Perhaps you're right," she told him one evening, the words like ash in her mouth. "Perhaps we could build something together." Her apparent capitulation gave her access to information about his schedule, his security, and most crucially, his plans to move her to a more isolated property from which escape would be impossible. Through Sylvia, she made contact with an underground network of activists who specialized in extracting victims of human trafficking. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. During the upcoming Eid holiday, when security would be relaxed and the household distracted, Jamie's would drive her to a safe house where international advocates were waiting to document her story and arrange safe passage home. But loyalty in the villa was always for sale to the highest bidder. The promised bounty of 50,000 dirhams proved more compelling to Jamie's than Nura's desperate pleas for help. He confessed the entire plan to Latif the night before it was to be executed, providing details of every contact and preparation. When Nura crept toward the garden gate during the festivities, Soraya was waiting in the shadows with a cold, triumphant smile. The confrontation that erupted in Latif's study became a three-way battle for Nura's soul. Soraya demanded the problem be solved permanently, her voice sharp with years of suppressed jealousy and fear. Latif, torn between obsession and the wounded pride of what he saw as betrayal, vacillated between fury and desperate pleading, and Nura, with nothing left to lose, made her final stand. She would reveal everything to international media, she threatened, naming every official who had taken bribes, every officer who had looked away, every crime committed within these marble walls. A silence fell over the room as all three realized they had reached a point where words were no longer enough, where the carefully maintained balance of power and fear was about to collapse into a violence that would leave only one of them standing. The final confrontation exploded in Latif's office as all three faced the inevitable end of months of manipulation, obsession, and fear. Latif paced behind his mahogany desk, torn between his delusional love and wounded pride. "You betrayed me," he said, his voice cracking. "After everything I offered you. After everything I promised your family. I thought we had something real." Soraya stood rigid by the door, her ultimatum hanging in the air like a blade. "Choose now, Latif. Her or me? I will not share you with this ungrateful servant any longer." Her voice held the cold finality of someone who had calculated every possible scenario and found only one acceptable solution. Nura, cornered with nowhere to run, found strength in her desperation. "I would rather die than live as your prisoner," she said, her voice eerily calm despite the terror coursing through her. "You can kill me, but you will never own me, and the world will find out what monsters you truly are." The argument escalated with terrifying speed. Latif lunged for Nura, perhaps to embrace her, perhaps to silence her threats. Soraya moved faster, her hand finding the heavy crystal paperweight that had sat on his desk for years, a gift from some forgotten business deal, now transformed into a weapon. The first blow caught Nura in the temple, sending her crumpling to the Persian rug. As Nura struggled to rise, blood streaming down her face, Latif's internal struggle resolved into fury. His participation sealed her fate. Together, they ensured the girl who had come seeking a better life was dead by 11:47 p.m. on a Friday in February. Her dreams buried under marble and lies, the cover-up began with the efficiency of seasoned criminals. Nura's body was walled up in the servants' corridor, the ongoing construction providing the perfect excuse for the new masonry. Soraya burned Nura's possessions in the garden incinerator, watching the smoke carry away the last traces of the life that had briefly threatened her security. The official story, delivered to police by Latif's cousin within hours, was simple: another runaway worker, likely headed back to Sri Lanka illegally. The remaining staff were given clear warnings about the consequences of speaking to authorities, along with deportation papers for anyone who seemed unreliable. Back in Kalutara, Nura's family filed desperate missing person reports when her promised calls stopped. The Sri Lankan embassy's efforts were mysteriously stalled through quietly disrupted diplomatic channels. International workers' rights organizations eventually took up the case, but their investigations met with bureaucratic resistance and official denials. It would be 2 years, during a renovation for new owners, before construction workers would find the skeleton behind the false wall. Dental records confirmed it was Nura. Forensic evidence linked both Latif and Soraya to the crime scene. But in a city where wealth and connection are the ultimate currency, justice proved as elusive as Nura's freedom had been. Latif's political connections activated immediately. Key witnesses suddenly left the country. Crucial evidence mysteriously vanished from police evidence rooms. His legal team constructed elaborate theories about disgruntled employees and jealous housekeepers. A quiet financial settlement was made to Nura's family, blood money that could never replace a daughter or assuage their guilt. Latif and Soraya relocated to Switzerland, their wealth opening doors that closed on their crimes in Dubai. The case was officially closed for lack of evidence. This story forces us to look beyond the glitter and ask the most difficult questions. How many other Nuras are living and dying in silence behind closed doors? How many other golden cages hold prisoners the world never sees, their stories entombed not in marble, but in apathy and impunity? This is where we need to hear from you. The comment section is more than just a space below this video, it's a community of conscience. We want to know your thoughts. What does this story make you feel? Anger? Heartbreak? A burning desire for change? Share your raw, unfiltered reaction below and let's start a real conversation. Tell us where you're watching from, your perspective, whether you're in London, Mumbai, Sydney, or Toronto, adds a vital, global voice to this discussion. Your engagement turns a solitary viewing into a collective demand for awareness. If this investigation into the hidden, human cost of luxury has impacted you, if you believe stories like Nura's must be dragged into the light, then your support is not just appreciated, it's crucial. Help us expose the truth by hitting that like button. It tells the algorithm that this content matters, that these stories deserve a platform. Subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the cases that powerful people try to bury. And most importantly, share this video. Share it with one person who needs to see it. Share it on your social media. Because awareness is the first, non-negotiable step toward change, and your share could be the spark that ignites a movement, the ripple that becomes a wave. The truth is our most powerful weapon against the silence. Stay aware, stay vocal. And we will see you in the next video.